Welcome to another episode of Remembering Who I Am. And the topic today is, what is life and what is death? Well, it's actually very simple in the context of what we're speaking of here. Life is what I am, not as a person. Remember, when I say I am or what I am or whatever, I'm never talking about the person, about the character. I'm talking about the essence. Okay? So life is all that there is. You can equate the word life with God or love, but not love in a personal sense of a feeling I feel for you or whatever. That's not what we're talking about, and we're going to have another video on that. But life is all that there is. Life is eternal. Life has no meaning. Life has no beginning and no end, not even middle. Life simply is. It's always been, is, and will always be. That is life within the context of what we're talking about here. The human experience is a temporary experience because it appears to have a beginning, is where we are born, and it appears to have a death, is when the body ceases to exist. But since life is eternal and it's all that there is, then life cannot be human. There's no such thing as human life. The human experience is a projection. A projection means that it is illusory. That's why, again, all that there is God, love, life. And the human experience is just simply a temporary, apparent distraction to all that there is. So, when we think we're afraid of dying, it's meant to say letting go of the body. In reality, within the context of what we're speaking here, what we're afraid of is living. I am afraid of living, you see? That's why I hang on to the body, because the body is the projection that keeps me away from living, from true love, from what love really is, which is what I really am. You see? So, in a sense, holding on to the belief that this is what I am is basically holding on to death. See how interesting, isn't it? Because this physical experience, no matter what I do, no matter where I go, will always end up in death, meaning the termination of its illusory experience. So death does not apply to life. There's no opposites. The opposite of life is not death. The opposite of birth is death. But birth and death are experiences, so to speak, that only happen or appear. What's the word I'm looking for? That has to do with the human experience. You see, the human experience that we have already established, that is illusory. So it's like when you're having a dream. You see, in the dream, the characters they have a beginning and they have an end. In the dream, usually the beginning is not a character being born and a character then dying. Usually in the dream is that the dream begins, a sequence of scenes happen, and then the sequence of scenes dissipate. You see, that's the equivalent of birth and death in the dream. Within this particular experience, which is a dream state, only that we believe this is our reality, within this context, well, of course, the beginning of life as a human experience begins with birth, and the end of life as a human experience ends in death. But in reality, none of that was life at all. It was just basically a projection, an illusory projection, right? Well, if it's projection, it has to be illusory, right? So, if you ask me, how do I see this whole thing about life and death? It's very simple. Life has nothing to do with my experience as a human being. When I go to bed at night, or when in the dream state, which is this one, in this dream I go to another dream state, meaning to go to bed at night, my attitude is, as I'm closing my eyes, is, God, I'm ready to come home. That's really my attitude. Always. Is, I'm ready to go. So every time this body goes to bed at night, I have no clue if it's going to wake up the next morning. It's irrelevant. Because in reality, when I go to bed at night, and then I go into, what I mean I go is not me the person, but again, this is the limitation of language, so I'm sorry. I go into a dream state, it could be said that I died. See, the me that the mind has been identified with has died. And it's beautiful. It's just a resting space that is marvelous. What can I tell you? So every night I die. And every morning I apparently awake. But in reality, in the context of what we're talking about here, the way I look at it is that when the body wakes up in the morning, to me, it's not saying that I've been given an opportunity to live or no, not at all. To me, it means that it's an opportunity that has been given me again so that I can look at fear so that I can be released from it. You see? So to me, when I wake up in the morning, it's obviously there's fear, and therefore it's an opportunity for me to look at it in such a way that I can be released from it. And then when I go to bed at night, I'm ready to come home again. You see? It's the prodigal son that is willing to go home this time. Because I'm not afraid of dying, because there's no such thing as death. Yeah, I'm not, as a human, as the human experience, I may be concerned about some pain or put it this way, it's not about dying, it's how am I living, right? If I'm going in a flash, it's wonderful. But if it's a very slow process, well, that is the part that maybe there's some resistance in there. But if that were to happen in my life, I trust that there's a reason why that had to be that way. And if I never lose sight of who I am, then there'll be no suffering throughout that process. But I don't try to hang on to this body in a sense of thinking that I want to stay here any longer. No, I take care of it. Yeah, that happens because that is what's supposed to be happening in my script. In other people's script, they're not supposed to take care of their bodies, so that's just part of their script. Again, we're not in charge. I'll make another video on that one. See, but to me, what is life? Life is all that there is. What is death? The illusion that there could be something opposite to life. You see? So life is what is. That's it. The physical experience is a projection. Projection is a meaningless projection. And another thing that I like to address is that we say I'm afraid of dying. Okay? My question is, do you know what death is? Because I can only be afraid of something that I've experienced. You see? Yeah, we can experience all sorts of psychological issues and physical issues or so, but do you really know what death is? Again, when I go to bed at night and go into deep sleep, that's death. So, and I tell you one thing, I mean, and if you're honest, you cannot deny that it's sweet. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. It's just like, it's deep rest. So to me, that's death because there's no I who's aware of the experience. But when I wake up in the morning after a really good night's sleep, there's a sense of rest. You see? Of course, if the mind is very conditioned to conflict, well, the conflict goes back again. And then why do you think people who cannot handle their experience get to the point that they end up taking all sorts of things to try to stay numbed and sleep? You see? It's kind of like, it's a way of saying, I want to die. See, in those moments when it's very painful, they're not afraid of dying. But in reality, that is not a death, that is basically a rest. So to me, death is rest. Notice in the in the funerals, and they put in the tombstone, rest in peace. Well, the invitation that I'm offering here is to learn or be willing to rest in peace right now. I don't have to wait until the body's gone so that I can put over there rest in peace. I rather have in my tombstone, he rests in peace his whole life, and now he's just no longer here. In the form, in the content, in the truth of who I am, yes. You see, but in the experience that is taking place right now is basically an illusory experience. It's a distraction. And now you may ask, okay, got it. Intellectually, I get this is all a distraction. But how can I have the experience of being conscious that this is not a distraction? Well, there's a little trap there, because the human being cannot have the experience I'm talking about, because the experience I'm talking about is the absence of the human being. You see? In other words, like saying, I want to have the experience of death. Well, if you want to have the experience of death, you have to let go of the body. But there's a way of living in the world, living this experience from that state of rest. There is a way. And the way I've seen it over and over happening for me, and I'm not saying that I'm in a particular state or I'm just enlightened or anything like that. Please don't misunderstand anything. But however, for whatever the reason is, I've experienced that the way in which I'm able to rest in peace most of the time, you see, at least this is just the way it's been happening, and it could change, I don't know, you see. But the way I see it happening more is when this trust begins to develop, and for me, is by being willing to know that I know nothing. Now, listen carefully, because it's very interesting. Every conflict that the mind experiences is usually attached to it's always attached to a meaning that the mind gives to anything. You see? So, the moment the mind begins to withdraw meaning from everything is where it opens up the space to be able to rest in peace. You see? So it's really very simple. It's very simple. When there's an awareness that nothing means anything, then means there's no story, and the story is the cause of all the suffering. You see? So what does death means to me? Absolutely nothing. What does life means to me? Absolutely nothing. What this world means to me? Absolutely nothing. Why is this happening? Why is this not happening? I wish things were this way or the other way. No, things are the way they are, and they all means absolutely nothing. In that place of meaningless existence is where I rest in peace. Now you may say, but if I live that way, life is boring. That is a meaning. You see? When you take away the concept and the meaning of anything, life is not boring, life is peaceful. You see? But again, this is a process through which the mind begins to get used to, and it begins to get accustomed to live that way. So when I wake up in the morning, I have no clue what's going to happen in my life. I have no clue whatsoever, and I don't care either, and I'm not looking forward to know either. Because there's enough trust in life that whatever is happening is exactly what is supposed to happen for the benefit of all. And if I know that love is in charge of life, because love is all that there is, then I have to trust that whatever is taking place in my life have to be a byproduct of love. And you may say, yeah, but how about these negative things or whatever? That's a meaning again. Negative, positive. In my experience, or the experience through this apparent illusory form, nothing means anything. Therefore, there's no positive or negative, or good or bad. All that there is what is. And when you withdraw meaning from that, that's where the mind can rest in peace, because it trusts that whatever is happening, I may not understand it, and I don't have to understand it, but as a universal principle is understood by the divinity itself. And if I trust divinity, meaning I trust myself, capital S, you see, then I have to trust that there's a reason why things are happening the way they do. And again, all the suffering is the meaning that I'm projecting onto any experience, and that meaning is what the mind uses to keep holding on to the belief that I am this body. You see? And as long as I keep holding on to the belief that I am this body, guess what I'm afraid of? Death. But when the mind becomes conscious of the fact that the mind is what is and it's eternal, then the fear of death disappears. And all that there is life. And there's nothing else. You see? So once again, when I talk about life, I'm not talking about human life. Human life is non-existence within the context I'm talking about, because a human experience is a projection. Life is what is before this body appears in this illusion. Life is what is while this body appears to be living or being in the illusion. And life is what is after the body leaves the illusion. You see? Life is what I am. See? Death is just a lie that the mind has constructed to hold on to the belief that it is a body, because the body is the one that supposedly it's born and it dies. But the essence of what I am is that which is eternal. And once again, I don't need to understand this, because understanding is still of the mind, it's still of the intellect, it's still of the body, or whatever you want to call it, it's still of the form. This is an awareness that settles in as the mind begins to drop meaning and withdraw the attention from the illusion, from the dream. So as I go through life trusting that life is all there is, in that trust, the awareness of what I am, of who I am, is just basically surface, and that is not something that is understood. That is an awareness that is more like even intuitive, and even the word intuitive, I have to be careful with it, because there's no one intuiting. I'm not intuiting. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how's the right word. I'm not intuiting. What I'm trying to say is that I am not experiencing any. I'm not experiencing any intuition, because there's no I experiencing anything. But within the context I'm talking about, meaning within this within the realm we seem to find ourselves into, meaning that the mind who's still engaged in the dream is sort of like an intuitive thing. It's just not. It cannot be. This is something we cannot talk about, because talking about it reinforces the belief that there's an I. You see. So in the end, that's why everything leads to silence, which in a sense, if you think about it, silence is a form of death. You see? It's a sweet death. See? So the invitation here is to die. Not to take your life away as a human being, or this is not the life we're talking about. This is not life. Life is what is, you see? So every night, I just rest in the sweetness of that death that I know is really not death. It's really the absence of what I've always thought I was. You see? And in that absence, I am resting in peace. And believe it or not, that's when I am actually alive.